500,000 Americans dead of COVID-19, an unimaginable toll now a year into the pandemic. Texas starts to thaw out, and residents lucky enough to keep their power now getting hit with the bill. Plus, we take a look at our clean energy future. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Monday, February 22nd. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano.
Woo-woo!
Reunited, Carlo.
Welcome back, my friend. It's good to have you. We missed you.
Thank you. Thanks to Baker for holding down the fort last week and for all of our great guests who I had on when you were out.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be back together.
It's good to have the band back. I'm excited.
All right. Lots of news to get to. As usual, the United States now on the brink of 500,000 coronavirus deaths, despite having just 4% of the global population. The U.S. accounts for 23% of global COVID deaths a year into this pandemic. More Americans have died of COVID-19 than in World War I, World War II, and Vietnam combined. The White House is going to be holding a moment of silence this evening in commemoration of the milestone, with President Biden expected to deliver remarks. Dr. Fauci made the rounds on the Sunday shows, saying that people should be prepared to wear masks in public into 2022, but he does expect a degree of normality to return by fall as vaccinations ramp up.
Fauci is starting to get on my last nerves here. What does he mean when he says this? What does that mean? I mean, I think that I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks with you, with Baker. When Fauci says stuff like this, I don't think that it's being helpful. I mean, I understand why President Biden and the White House are trying to underpromise and overdeliver. That's classic politics, right? Everybody does that. But Fauci's not an elected official, and he and a lot of the other scientists that we listen to, they have become so risk averse that I think what they're doing is they're now having the effect of really failing to sort of boost all of the good news that's out there. People need to feel like what they're doing is working, which it is based on how the numbers are falling through the floor. I'm not saying they couldn't come back with the variants, but right now the news is all good. And people want to hear that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And when he says, and I'm quoting here from when he was on CNN yesterday, I wanted to keep going down to a baseline that's so low that there's virtually no threat. Like, what does that mean, Doc? Virtually no threat. I mean, there's the virus, as long as the virus is going to exist, which we now believe it will, there's always going to be some threat. So I think the messaging is just, I understand what he's trying to do, and I understand that he doesn't want to be caught off guard like he was this time last year when he was telling us we didn't need to wear masks. But I just don't think that the messaging is on point right now.
I think you make a really good point about the messaging and also Dr. Fauci not being a politician. I think that that's the one thing that's missing from all of this is just voices from the scientific community giving us facts. And it feels like, and I think this is the biggest frustration, it feels like from day one, the scientific community or whoever at least was doing whoever the public face is of that community has been treating the American public like we're children. And I mean, it was quite obvious to me, and I spoke about it at length on the podcast, that wearing a mask would be helpful, right? Like, what wouldn't be helpful about wearing some sort of protection over your face?
Sure.
In a flu pandemic, for example, how would that possibly hurt, right? Like, why was that never the message from the beginning?
Yeah.
And it was always because they thought that regular people would be irresponsible and buy up the N95s that the healthcare industry so desperately needed. Had they said from the beginning, please don't buy, the healthcare industry needs those, doctors need those, but it would be helpful if you buy those disposable masks from the pharmacy, or you even put a scarf over your face, right?
Yeah.
Finally, they caught up. Then they didn't want to tell us that 2 masks would be better than 1, right? Like, they were so hesitant to tell us that when it is so obvious, right? Like, the less space you have between, the less air that you have that could possibly get between your mouth and your nose and the outside world, the better. It is just such common sense. Um, and even like the vaccine messaging, right? And there's been a lot of talk about it. They're saying once you get the vaccine, do absolutely nothing different. What kind of
Yeah,
messaging is that? I mean,
that's
I'm not
terrible.
saying
Right.
go out to a party, but you know what?
Right.
My parents are now, knock on wood, fully vaccinated.
All
And my
right. Excellent.
daughter, to go back to school, had to get a negative COVID test. Okay. So, and we
Mhm.
haven't left the house in a week. So we let her see them without a mask. Okay. They're fully vaccinated. She got a
Yes.
negative test. We would not have done that if they were not vaccinated. Now, this could come back and this could prove to be a terrible decision, right? But we're breathing a little bit easier knowing that our very high risk parents are both fully vaccinated right now. So I don't know. The messaging has always been just so off. And I think that's why, I mean, at least for me, I know you and Baker were taking a couple of very fun jabs at me, but because I'm taking COVID so seriously, and rightfully so. But I'm
All in
feeling
good
like
fun. But yes.
I'm starting to feel though that, like, when I, at least according to my Instagram page, like, am I the only one? I mean, it looks like everyone else I know is just
Yeah.
out and about doing stuff. And it's like I'm just still sitting here at home looking at the world from my window. I'm
Yeah.
trying, I don't know if anyone else feels like that, and maybe I need to let my hair down a little bit. I mean, I still do think this is a very real threat, but I
Of
agree with
course it
you,
is.
Carlo, in terms of the messaging. I think the scientific community and politicians, of course, have just never leveled with us.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Meanwhile, the Pfizer vaccine appears to be extremely effective in stopping the transmission of COVID 19, according to a large study of patients in Israel. One of the biggest outstanding questions with the vaccines has been whether that they can curb the virus from spreading, in addition to just protecting against illness. And the first real world data now gives reasons to be encouraged. So it is a preprint study that has not been peer reviewed, but the data is still a reason for optimism.
Well, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is really good news. Obviously, it's not right. It's not peer reviewed, so we don't know exactly, but this is good news. This is what Fauci should have been out there yesterday talking about. And this is why we need to get people vaccinated, because the vaccines are a work of unbelievable accomplishment, scientific accomplishment. There's also a growing body of research, Jill, suggesting that people who have already been infected may actually not need their second dose because the first jab provides pretty much all the immunity as both shots in people who haven't contracted the virus. So again, that could potentially be good because it would free up more supply. All of this is to say the news is good, good, good. I feel like I need to go down to the White House and like hold a sign out in Lafayette Park. Like the COVID news is good. We are turning the corner. The summer is going to be better. I'm not saying everybody should go out and rip their masks off and go party in some unventilated nightclub. And it is true when Fauci says like things it may take till 2022 to get back to normal. Like it's possible that we may not be doing stuff like that for a while, right? But the spring and the summer is going to look a lot different than it has been. I just feel it.
I heard Dr. Fauci, he was on Meet the Press yesterday talking with Chuck Todd about what you were just mentioning about that second dose. Mark my word, right? Okay, so the science is quite clear. People who've had the virus, according to at least this research, definitely do need the vaccine, right? There were some questions like, should people
Right,
who've had
right.
COVID, should they be at the back of the line? So the science would say no, they really do need the vaccine in some capacity to boost their immunity. But after just one shot, there is no additional benefit, according to this preliminary research. But will the US pivot its vaccine strategy? I will bet a lot that they will not. That they're going
Right.
to think that we just can't handle that, that it's too confusing, that we're not responsible enough, that if you've had the COVID, it's too much for the American public to be able to handle, that some people are getting one and others are getting two. So
Yeah.
I would make a pretty strong bet that despite the science being quite clear, that the US will not pivot its strategy. And I think it's unfortunate because I could tell you, a very big portion of my vacation attempting to get an appointment for a loved one of mine who's high risk. And
Oh, it's
no luck.
infuriating,
I
right?
mean, I
Yeah.
called the hotline numerous times. I went online, and they just don't exist. I came up empty time and time again. I mean, look, more people that I know are vaccinated at this point at least with
Mhm.
one shot, if not two, or do have appointments. It is getting better, but it's still
Yeah.
infuriatingly slow.
I mean, think about it, Jill. Both of our parents, all four of our parents, are vaccinated now. That's incredible. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
If you said if we were back in those horrible days of the last spring, or even before Christmas, if you said that both of our parents here on February 22nd were going to be fully vaccinated, that's unbelievably good news, right?
No, absolutely. Okay, it is going to hit 70 degrees today in Houston and in Austin, which is a far cry from last week's single digit temps. The Texas thaw is underway. The power now almost entirely back, but water service remains disrupted for a third of the state. For some residents and businesses who were lucky enough not to lose electricity last week, they are now getting billed for the privilege to the tune of $1,000 per day. These bills are astronomical, Carlo.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, you sort of missed this story the last week. It was pretty upsetting. It made me pretty upset on a number of levels. But again, this goes back to Texas having this unregulated power grid. So in Texas, you can't do this in other places, but in Texas, you can tie your utility bills to wholesale electricity prices, which fluctuate based on supply and demand, and that typically makes them cheaper. However, when the blackouts hit and demand jumps and those prices then skyrocket, you're left holding the bag. The wholesale electricity prices were up 10,000% last week. So yeah, now you're getting all these stories about people who are getting these bills for like, $10,000, $15,000 for having their lights on last week. It's insane. I mean, there needs to be a serious reckoning about just in Texas about how they handle this grid, because this is going to happen more often, right? It's obviously not normal to be 3 degrees in Dallas, but it's going to become more normal.
Look, I've heard it described. If you're confused as to how this possibly happened, I've heard it described kind of like Uber and surge pricing. That's sort of how
Sure.
their
Yeah.
electric grid
Right.
operates. And one of the more annoying parts for most people is that it's an automatic charge, right? So this money, even if eventually it gets refunded, if politicians get involved, it's already been taken out of their account. Like
Right.
most people have it set up to direct deposit or whatever it is,
Auto
direct
pay. Yeah.
withdrawal. Um, so that is just like insult to injury. Ted Cruz, meanwhile, on the ground in Houston, handing out bottled water after his ill-fated trip to Cancun. I definitely heard about that, Carlo, while I was on my own vacation, my own staycation, I should note.
Yeah.
And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, she has fundraised close to $5 million for Texas residents. She was also in the Houston area over the weekend.
Incredible what she's been doing. Her and Beto O'Rourke, $5 million is real money. So kudos to them. I was thinking more about Ted Cruz this weekend, which is that's a good way to ruin your weekend. But
Why?
I don't know. No, I was thinking about Ted Cruz and not just him, but I was thinking about Gavin Newsom. I was thinking about Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, Andrew Cuomo, our illustrious governor here in New York. All of these elected officials, right? They're in these states they pretty much can't lose elections. That's the problem, right? Ted Cruz will have that Senate seat as long as he wants it. Andrew Cuomo will run for governor next year. Is it next year in New York? And he will almost certainly win a third or fourth term, whatever it is, even though he has completely mismanaged the nursing home situation with COVID. That's because, these states are so our politics, this is a longer conversation for another day, but our politics has become so adversarial, right? That you will vote for Ted Cruz if you're a Republican, even though you know that he does not deserve to be reelected, if for no other reason than that he went to Cancun in the middle of a major statewide crisis. You Democrats in New York will vote for Andrew Cuomo next year, even though they know that he does not deserve to be reelected because of how he mismanaged the nursing home data. Gavin Newsom, same thing. Greg Abbott, same thing. I don't know how we fix that. Shame doesn't work with these people, right? So the only thing that's going to work is when they get to a point where they don't believe that they have these voting blocks on lockdown, right? So where Democrats start saying, actually, I'm not going to vote for Andrew Cuomo in New York. I may actually even vote for a third party candidate just to show him. Or in Texas, the other, Republicans saying that. Does that sort of, do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I think it's a bigger conversation. I don't entirely agree. I mean, Beto O'Rourke almost won in Texas, and he's on the
Sure.
ground, like you're saying, raising money with AOC. I think that it's possible that voters would vote some of these people out. I don't know. But I want to hit on this story
Yeah.
that we did in the newsletter Friday, mostly because I know this is like your type of story, Carlo. So I want to get to it. It's kind of related to what happened in Texas. Geothermal energy, basically using the Earth's own heat to generate power. It's always sort of been the black sheep of renewables, too expensive, too complicated, impossible to scale, but perhaps not anymore. Last week, Bill Gates invested $30 million into a company that says it's figured out how to tap geothermal to heat homes. Separately, BP and Chevron put up 40 million bucks for a startup that says it can extract geothermal heat on demand. Carlo, again, I know that this is stuff that you follow really closely. So why is this such a big deal?
Okay, so yeah, the reason why geothermal has such potential, it's almost really too good to be true. And just like a little brief just explainer here, the Earth's core basically as hot as the sun, give or take a few thousand degrees, right? It is believed that if you were to tap 0.1% of that heat underneath the ground, that you could supply all of humanity's energy needs for the next 2 million years and with zero emissions. So think about that, right? I've been researching this for a Cheddar report. It has been giving me reason to be optimistic about the future. I know that we've talked a lot about sort of like these energy innovations, and I think that's something that we really need to stay on top of because it's become an actually undercovered, probably one of the more undercovered stories in the media right now. Between the prospects of geothermal, carbon capture technology, which is really starting to come into its own, advanced battery technology that we've been talking about. We're seeing it with cars, but it has a million different uses. Plus the cost of solar and wind power falling through the floor. What's happening with clean energy right now is just incredible. It's all the more reason why it was infuriating last week when so many politicians came out and were like blaming like the wind turbines in Texas for their issues. Like we are on the precipice here of a revolution in renewable technology that is going to have major good impacts when it comes to climate change. So geothermal is just one of those. Obviously, it's in the beginning, but I just want people to sort of keep that word in the back of their head when they hear about it. Geothermal energy, this could be sort of the fusion of the future.
This just crossing this morning, Boeing recommending airlines that use its 777 jets with a specific engine stop flying those planes until they can be inspected. It follows that harrowing scene in Denver over the weekend. A United flight had just taken off from DEN and then had to turn back when one of its engines caught fire and rained debris over a suburban neighborhood. Somehow, no one was injured, either on board or on the ground, but a giant chunk of the engine missed one house by just a matter of feet.
See that picture?
Crazy pictures.
That guy standing in his yard with this engine turbine just like on his front porch. Amazing. But how about that pilot and crew? Shout out to them for landing that plane somehow safely with the engine literally on fire. Incredible pics. I'll link to them in the newsletter today if you didn't get a chance to see over the weekend.
And finally, Carlo, I think it is safe to say that Bridgerton star Regé-Jean Page has crossed over into the mainstream heartthrob status after he hosted SNL this weekend, at least judging by viewer reaction on social media. Probably the buzziest skit of the episode, centered around a group of guys playing pool and becoming increasingly emotional when Olivia Rodrigo's driver's license came on the jukebox. They also poked fun repeatedly at Ted Cruz and Andrew Cuomo for their respective scandals.
Okay, so I thought of you. Did you see this episode?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So I thought of you because this guy, what's his name? Regé-Jean Page. I was like, as soon as I saw him come on.
Page.
Yeah, as soon as I saw him come on, I was like, oh, now I see why Jill is such a Bridgerton fan because this dude is extremely.
Why I watch it repeatedly? Like it's now on my default.
Yes, good God, he is a handsome guy, huh? Man. But okay, not to go back to Ted Cruz and Andrew Cuomo, but I do want to just make this point.
Let's talk about Regé-Jean.
I know,
no. It's so much better.
It really is, but it's just important because the Cuomo thing is really starting to cross over, which I just made a note of that when I watched this episode. When SNL is hitting you 2 or 3 times, especially when you're a lib, right? I mean, SNL is a show produced by and for New York liberals. So when they're knocking somebody like Andrew Cuomo, that's a sign that your your scandal has really reached sort of mainstream status. But that's boring. Yes, Regis Jean Page, he is handsome, and what's her name? Rosalia and Bad Bunny, they were really good too.
I thought they were good. Look, I do think though SNL hits everybody, right? Even though politically they're left leaning most likely. It's a show that they kind of give they're pretty tough on most candidates or most politicians, which I think I very much appreciate. And yeah, Reggae John, he's so good looking. I'm just ready for season 2. Come on,
When he's
Shonda Rhimes.
I burn for you. I burn for you, Jill.
I thought the opening, the cold open, I thought was math, like the Britney Spears skit, but I thought his opening monologue was hysterical.
That and the driver's license skit was really funny. I was
And
dying. Hey, you heard it
and
here
also
first, by
that
the way. I was
song
telling you about
Loco,
that song. Oh yeah, that was good. Where she's
that
talking to
was
her
great
plants.
too. Oh, which is basically how it all started, right? Like that's been everybody's quarantine, I think. Okay. It was great to be back, Carlo. I missed you. I missed
Back, Jill.
everyone behind the scenes as well. I missed everyone who listens. Much appreciated though for the week to sleep and hang with my daughter and do not much else. So, okay, that is what you need to know for Monday, February 22nd.
See you guys tomorrow.